We are now
Yeah, it's wonderful.
we are now live.
Good job, Carrie.
So welcome everybody, and everybody online. Sorry you missed some amazing dessert already. we're a couple minutes late because we're all hurriedly stuffing our faces with this.
Good stuff.
It is not salsa. That is not salsa on the cake. I know it looks like it, but it is some delicious rhubarb. Slightly, sweet, but it's got a nice that rhubarb little tang to it, and some delicious pound cake. Oh my gosh, it is ridiculous.
That is being recorded
Absolutely
for the
ridiculous.
people at home.
And there's still more left, so we'll see.
But if you come here, it'd be too late.
And I was just saying, like from now on, next week we're going to do a new series, so we're going to do desserts and devotions.
It's going to be the new cooking show.
Yeah, it's going to really be heavily more on the desserts part, you know. The devotion will just be the last few minutes. All right, well, welcome everybody. Tonight, I'm really hoping to be able to wrap up Daniel. And really, we've got a bunch to go through yet. Well, not a bunch, but about 20 some odd verses left in chapter 11. And then chapter 12 is very brief, and we can go through that quick. But wish it worked out that we would have had class last week, because for the rest of chapter 11, we're going to be doing more of this history lesson kind of stuff, which is lots of fun. But
What is that?
history, like our last class, we were talking about the vision that Daniel was receiving was basically almost very detailed prophecy of exactly what was going to happen with certain kings and certain kingdoms.
That
And
was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yes.
Yeah.
Did I say last week? I meant 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So tonight is going to be a little bit more of the same. And the point of it, there's the value of that is just that, God was giving Daniel a very specific, most prophecies in Scripture are kind of vague, and some of them are specific, but especially when we think about the book of Revelation, it's general. There are kind of overarching themes, but a lot of it is sort of, there's no real set this happens, then this happens, then this happens. It's kind of all mishmashed. But what he's giving Daniel here is very specific, and it lines up, and there's no way that it does not line up with historical goings on. So we'll just dive right in. Let's see, we've got verse 20. All right. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. All right. Leading up to this, we were dealing with the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. These were the two main kingdoms that we're getting prophecy about. And this was the Seleucid Empire. This was basically Egypt. All right, so we were dealing with Ptolemy and whoever. So anyway, I don't remember. So this then shall rise in his place. So this is going to be, who we're talking about, is Seleucus the third?
Is he
Fourth.
a king?
Yes. Seleucus the fourth. And this is he lived from 217 to 175 BC. So we're getting closer to the time of Christ, so we're clipping right along. So he's talking about this guy shall arise, who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. So the Seleucid Empire at this time encompassed Assyria, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Media, and Persia. So a pretty large empire. Now this exactor of tribute is interesting because Seleucus the fourth did send his finance minister, Heliodorus, to Jerusalem with the intent to seize some of the treasures of the temple. So Seleucus sends his finance minister to exact a tribute for his glory, to go and kind of plunder the temple. And actually, 2 Maccabees 3, that's in the Apocrypha, Second Maccabees 3 records this whole account. So, I mean, very much details what happens. The cool thing is that, so this Heliodorus guy comes to Jerusalem, and the people are just like, no, you can't come in, and, they're just like, oh, this is terrible. And then God sends a heavenly army, basically, to assault Heliodorus and his men. And a lot of fun stuff happens, and they run for their lives because they're up against these heavenly forces. And he says, within a few days he shall be broken. Now, Seleucus didn't die a few days afterwards, but, I mean, we got to remember in prophecy, timing is kind of loose. So when it says a few days later, it means in a short time afterwards he'll die. Not by a battle or not by anger. Well, Seleucus IV did not die in battle. He did not die in anger in like a popular uprising like his father died in a popular uprising. But actually he died, he was poisoned by, of all people, Heliodorus, his finance minister.
He died how?
He was poisoned.
Oh.
So, and the idea is he was possibly in line with this guy's brother, but he's poisoned, and Heliodorus kind of takes over briefly. He assumes control. So, there's a lot more fun stuff. That's just a brief one. So, we'll move on to the next section, 21 through 24. There we go. In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds. Oh, whoops. But only for a time. Oh, I'm sorry. People online. I accidentally hit my... There we go. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. Sorry about that, everybody online. Okay. So, in his place, so this guy dies, and in his place rises somebody who is a contemptible person. So, a really nasty guy. And this guy we've already heard about.
Is he related to
No.
the one that just died?
Is he related? He is his brother? Yeah. His brother takes charge. And we have heard about this guy, Antiochus IV, right? All right. Brother to Seleucus. Now, Antiochus, and we're going to hear a little bit more about him, he's who we talked about when he profaned the temple. He brought in, he sacrificed a pig on the altar. He's the reason why the Maccabean revolt happened in Jerusalem, which is where we get Hanukkah. So this guy, and he's kind of the climax of the Old Testament pre-Jesus oppression of the Jews by the outside forces. So Antiochus Epiphanes takes his place. Royal majesty has not been given. All right, so Seleucus, his brother, had a son who was the rightful heir. However, according to a treaty, his son had been sent off to Athens. So while his son is in Athens, he kills allegedly. He allegedly has his brother killed. And it's like, oh, my nephew is rightful heir. Don't worry, I'll rule in his place. So he kind of makes himself king in place of his nephew. He actually has I believe he has a young son who he makes co-regent and ends up killing too. He's not a good guy. He's a really nasty guy. All right, verses 22 through 24 are kind of a general overview of what happens during this guy's reign. Army shall be utterly swept away. So he did go out and try to conquer a lot, and a lot of battles were fought. Even the prince of the covenant. Okay, so swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. Okay, so just follow me with this one. Prince of the covenant here, most likely, and especially since we're dealing with this guy, means the high priest, the leader of the covenant, essentially. So the leader of the covenant of God for people of Jerusalem at that time. So the high priest, who was this guy named Onias. Onias? Did I spell that right? Onias, the third. All right. So he is the high priest. Now, during this time, and Antiochus was a very big proponent of this.
Wait a minute. Ananias the third.
He's the high priest of Jerusalem.
And he's from Israel.
Yeah, he's in Jerusalem.
He's that Greek. And this one,
This is the Seleucid king.
and where is he from?
He's Syria, Babylon, that whole area. So the northern empire.
Yeah. Okay.
So during this whole time, and in general, there's a process of Hellenization going on in Israel or Judah at the time. So this is basically the making things Greek. You know, when we talk about Hellenization, it's everything is becoming Greek. The influence of the Greeks is coming in. So a lot of people are very open to this. Antiochus is a big proponent of this. He's like, yeah, cool. Onias the high priest, no. He's not a happy guy about this. He does not like this process of Hellenization. He is against it. He was opposed to all this Greek influence that was coming in and leading people away from the covenant, right? So, his brother, Jason, his brother Jason wants to be high priest. So this guy sends a bribe to Antiochus, sends a bribe and a promise saying, hey, here's some money, and I promise to encourage this Hellenization. I will promote all these Greek reforms if you make me high priest. So Antiochus says, all right, sure.
Jason is his brother?
Onias' brother.
Isn't Onias is a Hebrew?
What
Yeah.
happens to
Jason
him?
is Greek.
Yep. No. Jason's his brother.
Jason's a Greek name.
Well, his name is, yeah.
Oh.
But and that he's going by it might partially be why he's like, yes, Greek, awesome stuff. But he is brother to the high priest. All right, so he becomes high priest.
What happens to Ananias?
Well, he just gets pushed aside. Okay, so Onias is not too thrilled about this. Later, so some time goes by. Jason is high priest. Onias is out. Another guy, Menelaus, which that's another Greek name, right? That sounds about, yeah, I think so. Menelaus, who is of Judah, but not of the high priestly family. So he's not related to anybody. He's not in the line of high priests. Well, he wants to be high priest. So what does he do? He sends a bigger bribe to Antiochus and says, make me high priest. And Antiochus says, all right, sure. So now he's the high priest. Well, these guys are pissed. They're not very happy at all. And then he's not a great guy. He starts to steal some of the gold from the temple. Not a great thing. So Onias hears about this, and he begins a formal protest against this guy. So things start ramping up, and there's protests going on. Onias is he actually has to flee for his life. Ends up finding some refuge in Antioch, but later is lured out and murdered. So, a lot of fun stuff going on in Jerusalem at that time. And because of all this, and because of all this kind of chaos that's going on, and it's internal strife. I mean, Antiochus is involved because he took bribes and said, yeah, you can be high priest. But essentially, the issue is all internal. The problem is that at some point, Antiochus was coming back from a battle, and he heard that there was some kind of uprising, and he assumed that it was uprising against him. So that's kind of what kicked off his sort of rather brutal oppression. So it's like, oh, is that how it's going to be? Well, let's put the kibosh on that. So that's where everything starts to go crazy with that. I did it again. Sorry, people online. All right. Any questions about this? I mean, and it's not like you don't have to remember any of this. Only so much as this is what is being prophesied, and this is pretty much what's taking place here. He says, even the prince of the covenant will be broken, Onias, absolutely. From that time, an alliance is made with him, and he shall act deceitfully. He shall become strong with some small people. So, there's deceitful alliances being made. He becomes strong with a small group of people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province. He was actually very well known for being very lavish with his gifts by plundering everybody else and giving it away to his friends and whatever. So everything that Daniel is seeing in this vision, it plays out very, very much. So, moving on to the next section. Verses 25 through 28. There we go. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. Oh, yeah, this is fun. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plot shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. And as for the two kings, their heart shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, for his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall work his will and return to his own land. Okay.
Now,
Oh.
So all
who
this
is
is-
he talking about?
All this is a vision?
This is still part of the vision, yeah. He's still talking about this guy. Okay? And I'm sorry, online I did not catch Antiochus. Yes, Antiochus is the, well, I think I already explained it. Sorry, I didn't catch the comment soon enough, so hopefully I explained what the question, what your question was. Okay, so we're still talking about Antiochus. So he'll stir up his power and go against the king of the south with a great army. So Antiochus, in the midst of this, after all this, or amongst all this, invades Egypt. He goes to battle against Egypt. Okay, this is Ptolemy the which? Sixth. We got a lot of Ptolemies. All right.
Is he the king of the south of Egypt?
He's the king of Egypt, yeah. So Ptolemy, so you got the king of the south, the king of south shall wage war, but he shall not stand, for plot shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. So even those who eat his food shall break him. Ptolemy was given really bad advice, partially by his mother, or at least some advisors. They've basically said, hey, you should try to take back Palestine. That would be awesome. Basically the land where Jerusalem and Judah and all that. So he was encouraged to take back this land. Guess who owned it or guess who had it at the time? There you go. So he's ill-advised to do this. Antiochus hears about it. He gets wind of the plans. So here's where we get plots will be devised against him. So he was already prepared to intercept him. And then in the course of this great defeat of Egypt by Antiochus, more of his advisors advised him, hey, just run away. Well, he was caught. And he was caught trying to flee. So he was not able to succeed, although he's not dead yet. Okay. So he doesn't succeed.
Thank you.
What do we have here? Even though, blah, blah, blah. Okay, as for the two kings. So now we talked about two kings. Well, here's what happens. So, after Ptolemy the Sixth's defeat, so he's defeated, Antiochus kind of takes control over a lot of Egypt. Okay? However,
Did he get part of Egypt too?
yes. Yeah, he got most of Egypt. But he did not have Alexandria. That, the people of Alexandria, or the people around there, made Ptolemy's younger brother, Ptolemy the Seventh, they made him king in Alexandria. So now you've got three kings, all right? You've got Ptolemy the Sixth, who is kind of deposed and run off. You've got Antiochus, who is now ruling over most of Egypt. And you have Ptolemy the Seventh, who is king over a little portion of Egypt, Alexandria. So Antiochus catches this great plan. He's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to make an alliance with Ptolemy, who I just beat. Because I can use him to try to defeat his brother. Now Ptolemy the Sixth is like, he happily receives this alliance because he thinks, I'm going to use Antiochus to take back what is mine. So both of these guys are kind of plotting against each other. And this is where we have right here. As for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table. So they're like, oh, well, we'll be aligned together. Meanwhile, each one is plotting against the other. But to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the time appointed. But it won't work, because this alliance falls apart when these two reconcile. They're like, hey, we're family. Let's stand together. So this whole alliance falls apart, and now we're back to just chaos and all sorts of fun stuff. And actually, it was, who's the Ptolemy's sister? Cleopatra II, I think. She's not the Cleopatra. The Cleopatra is what? Cleopatra VII, I think. Anyway, so this is Cleopatra II, and she kind of reconciles these two brothers. It is soap opera nonsense.
And
Just
she was her sister,
yes, yes.
okay?
So a lot of stuff going on. And then talking about Antiochus, verse 28, he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the Holy Covenant. So this is where he refocuses back on Jerusalem with all that chaos going with the protests. And so now he's set against the people of the covenant. So he's going to oppress the Jews severely. How are we doing so far? You tracking?
So that guy, the seventh, is still in charge of Alexandria?
Um,
And they kind of split up.
yeah, and I don't know.
That's where it comes.
It's going to get. Yeah, I don't know if they were able to actually capture more of Egypt. There was a lot of stuff going on. So we can dig more into that later if you want. I'd have to bone up on more of what was going on. I just kind of have the highlights as it pertains to Daniel. But yeah, a lot of crazy stuff going on here. So let's see. Ooh, yeah, okay. So I think we're done with them for a while. We're just going to focus on Antiochus. I know, right? Only one king. All right, next section. Daniel 11, 29 through 35. All right. Oh, I wonder where... Oh, okay. Oh, this is fun. Okay. All right, verse 29. At the time appointed he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be that this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the Holy Covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who knew their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. And some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white, until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. Okay.
Did all this vision come to pass?
Yeah.
Everything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Like, specifically. Yeah, that's the cool thing about the vision of chapters 10 and 11 is that everything that was prophesied is like happened, like pointedly. We're going to get into chapter 12 where now it's going to go vague again. It's going to get very generic, or not generic, but very symbolic. And plus, it hasn't happened yet. But for all this, it's like it's eerily accurate, like painfully accurate. Almost like God knew what was going on.
Daniel telling it to?
What's that?
Who was Daniel prophesying it to?
No, this is a vision being given to Daniel.
Oh,
He's writing down the vision
this
that he's...
is what God told
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Okay, now I understand.
So, at that time, Antiochus will return and come into the south, but it shall not be as it was before. So, 168 BC comes into the south. Again, he wants to invade Egypt. So, Ptolemy must have whittled some more land back. So, this is his second invasion, his plan to conquer Egypt, 168 BC. So, he goes down there. However, was the same verse 30, ships of Kittim shall come against him. Kittim refers to these islands, or a specific island, but islands in the Aegean Sea, i.e. Rome. So basically, Antiochus gets it in his head, I'm going to go defeat Egypt. I'm going to conquer Egypt. Rome shows up and says, oh no, 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 you are not. The fun thing is that, so Antiochus is going down, and these Roman ships intercept him. There's this Roman commander on the ship, and he's got an official decree from the emperor or king that basically says, Antiochus, go home. You're drunk, go home. It basically says, no, leave Egypt alone. You're done. So now he doesn't know this. So he sees the Roman commander from far off. Now he's not at war with Rome. So he's like, oh, hey, come, all right, friend. Well, the Roman commander approaches him very cautiously and basically says, like, the history, as it's recorded, is Antiochus reaches out his hand, like in friendship. The Roman commander very pointedly refuses to take his hand, and instead says, I think you should read this first. Basically be like, you're going to be a pal, or are we going to have to do something? We're going to have to start some stuff. So he reads it, and it basically says, look, go home. You're not going to do this. This is how it's going to be. Telling the king of the Seleucid Empire what's going to happen. So he says, he basically said, well, I must confer with my council, before I give you any, if I'm going to agree to this or not. And allegedly, according to the history, what the commander did was he didn't say anything, but he took a reed or something that he could write with, and basically drew a circle around where Antiochus was standing, and said, you will not leave that circle without giving us your answer. And apparently there was a really awkward silence where he's just like completely, undone by this boldness. But the commander was like, what's it going to be? And Antiochus ultimately stood down. And was like, guess we're going home. So this is kind of the beginning of the end for this guy. His power is like, ooh. And also shows you who is the big boy in town now. Rome has been in ascendancy, and that they can send one of their commanders to confront this guy of his empire and tell him, like, no, go home. And he has to do it. Says a lot about Rome and what you're dealing with there. So yeah, that's exactly. So I mean, obviously that's not detailed in the prophecy, but ships for Kittim shall come against him. He shall be afraid. So I mean, that actually, he probably had to change his pants after that one, and withdrew. Turned back, and in Ratio basically turned back and took out his anger on the Jews. Okay, and this is where the rest of this we get that he will profane the temple, the fortress, take away the burnt offering, and he did all this. So he came, he oppressed the Jews. He basically said, he forbade worship at the temple. He forbade owning any of the scrolls of the Word of God. He forbade circumcision. Anything to the Jewish practices could be punished by death if you were caught doing it. Set an idol of Zeus on the altar in the temple. Then later sacrificed a pig. Well, they think a pig on it, and this is a horrible abomination kind of thing. So terrible, terrible stuff that goes on. So all of this is basically an overview of what he did. That wise among the people shall make many understand. So there was a small group of Jews who rose up. It wasn't like everybody; they were pretty oppressed. But the Maccabees, the family, and the guy, the father's name was Matthias, I want to say something like that. One of his sons was Judah or Judas Maccabee. And it's kind of the revolt is named after him. Anyway, they were all kind of the ones leading the revolt. And they had other people who joined in with this, and they managed to get him out. They managed to kick him out, to get rid of his influence. They reinstituted, they cleansed the temple, they reinstituted proper worship, and all the practices, they got back into it. So they recaptured Jerusalem and the temple, essentially. So get rid of that guy. Questions about that?
Well, who ended up being the king there?
Of where?
What did that?
Well, after this guy loses power,
Yeah.
well, now it's all about Rome. This is the end of the Seleucid Empire.
Oh.
I mean, essentially. I don't know exactly when you'd say it officially ended, but I mean, this was, Rome basically told him, you're done. And so, yeah, after him, there's no more, this is gone. It's all just Rome. Everything's Rome. Rome comes in and takes over all things. So that is that. Now, we're still going to talk about this guy a little bit. Maybe. Questions about that so far?
The latter part there, verses 34 and 35 is talking about the Maccabees.
Yes. And not just specifically them, but others like them, the people who rose up against them. Some of the wise shall stumble so that they may be refined, purified, and made white. So, and actually what God is saying is like, I'm going to allow this so that some of those wise, the ones who believe in me and hold to me, this will be a purifying process for them. Through this affliction, through this persecution, he's refining them to solidify their faith. So there is point behind it. It's just painful and not something we want to go through at all. All right. Cool. We're making good time. Okay. So the next section, 36 through 39, is going to be a split. Not a split, but this is a new section. Okay? And it's going to be, let's read it and then I'll explain. So Daniel 11, 36 through 39. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him, he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. Okay, so this section, beginning with verse 36, is pretty universally agreed that this is a whole new section. So the king that this refers to is not this guy. Okay? Early on from antiquity, the Jews agreed that this was a new section. The early church fathers all agreed this was a new section. Luther and all the Lutheran reformers agreed this was a new section. That was, everyone understood it. Now, there's a few reasons to that. First, there's two main interpretations of who this could be. It's either it does refer to this guy, and it's a continuation, or it refers to an evil, eschatological king. Or, if you really want to get easy with this, Antichrist. So think Revelation. The man of lawlessness, the Antichrist, okay? Eschatological just refers to end times.
And power?
End times,
And-
the last day. So, the idea that it's talking about Antiochus, it's the same section. There's no, it just kind of continues talking. These verses generally refer to religious hubris, which he was kind of full of himself. He had coins minted of his face that said Antiochus Epiphanes or Theos Epiphanes, basically Antiochus God manifest, like I am God manifest. But he never really exalted himself like that. He didn't exalt himself over other gods. In fact, the very coins that had his head and his little like I am God on the reverse side had Zeus or Apollo. He was a really big fan of Zeus. When he put an idol of Zeus in the temple, I mean, that was kind of his guy. He was not, he was very, very well known for his devotion to the Greek gods. So this description doesn't really fit because it's like, oh, he rejects every other god. He puts himself above every other god, doesn't follow any other god. It's like, well, that's not him. So yeah, it's just not, and plus the following verses, 40 through 45, when it talks about what this guy does, has no connection whatsoever with him. Like, absolutely none. So it's not, almost certainly not him. So the other way to think about, which is what traditionally Christians have understood this, is that this king refers to the Antichrist, this evil eschatological king. All right. The early church fathers all agreed. St. Chrysostom, St. Jerome, St. Hippolytus, Luther, they all pretty much agreed on this. There is a break here that happens because it talks about, and the king shall do as he wills. Oh, I'm sorry. If we go back before this, the previous section ends by saying, until the time of the end, for it still waits the appointed time. So the last section ends with, and it shall be the appointed time when this all ends. And now, the appointed time, we're going to talk about this guy. So the appointed time, meaning the fulfillment of time, God's time, the last day, right? So this is a new section talking about the end. This is kind of a glaring detail, is that in all of chapter 10 and 11, it's always the king of the south or the king of the north. The only time that those aren't mentioned is when it says the kings conspired together, meaning the king of the north and the south. The king is never in reference to any of these guys. So this is a completely new guy that it's referencing. And the similarities that we see here, any similarities, really just goes to show that this guy and how bad he was, he's just a foreshadowing of what was to come. Kind of like when you've got, Moses is a foreshadowing of Christ. All these Old Testament fathers were foreshadowing Christ. Well, this guy, in a lot of ways, foreshadowing this guy. Just like, the Roman emperors, Nero, were foreshadowing this guy. So this is all kind of looking ahead. Says the king does as he will do as he pleases. If you recall earlier in Daniel, when he has those visions of like the bear and the leopard, and he says those animals did what they pleased. Okay, so there's a similarity there, except that it's like here's a bear and he looks like this and he does this and he sounds like that and he does as he pleases. It's kind of like a little subscript about what he does. This guy, he does what he pleases is how he's identified. Okay, that is, he's identified as he does what he pleases. He has a willful arrogance. Like he doesn't care what God says and he's going to do whatever he wants anyway. Which sounds kind of like, sounds like the devil, right? And if you notice, I did it again. Sorry, people. If you notice, in all of the description here of what he does, previously all the kings that were prophesied about in Daniel all had to do with they're going to conquer and they're mighty and they're powerful. All the description about this king is not about his physical strength or his power. It's about his religious, his religious, what do you want to call it? Arrogance. There we go. That it's all pointed about him elevating himself above even the God of gods, even above Yahweh. He speaks wonderful things. That just means divine words, not like he's like, ooh, good things. But he speaks divine, godly sounding things, but they're against God. So, kind of like how Satan uses Scripture to challenge Jesus in the wilderness. He will prosper until the indignation is accomplished. It's basically, it's saying that Satan seems to be prospering and having his way of things until God's anger against him is completed. So until the last day. And, put your head back into Revelation. If you remember, when did we do that? Last year? Felt like all of last year. Anyway, so Revelation, the story of Revelation was, until Jesus returns, he's going to be making life hell for everybody. Literally. But when that day comes, it's it. God says enough. Boom, you're done. And he gets kicked out. So that's basically what we're seeing described here. Yes.
I'm confused. So we're not
Really?
we're not talking about a historical figure anymore. Then
No.
We're talking about a period.
We're talking about the eschatological workings of Satan, the Antichrist, during the time of the church,
Is
essentially.
it that we don't know who ruled in those areas after 168 BC or whatever the timeline was?
Oh, no, we do. It's just that none of this matches anybody
I
who
see.
ruled like that. Because even you could look to the Romans and say, like, the Caesars were all, they regarded themselves as living gods. But even still, they didn't necessarily, they allowed worship. Like they were quite happy to say, Jews, sure, worship your thing, pay your taxes. But, as long as you don't get too crazy, worship however you want. I don't care. They were very pluralistic in their exercise of that. And in fact, the problem with the Christians was they said, I'm a god, now worship me. And the Christians were like, no. Because the Romans were like, you can worship Jesus, I don't care. But you got to worship me too. And that was the problem. So the description of how this evil king reigns does not fit any of the following profiles. And especially just with the universal agreement that this is a new section referring to a new guy that really refers to the end times. Pretty much just kind of wraps it all together. Plus, you'll see when we get into the next section that it's like, it's talking about the last day.
It just seems very odd that Satan has been in action in this world since the beginning, since the fall, right? And now it brings up like it's something new or...
Well, and we're gonna get into that briefly, because this is really going to condense a lot of what we talked about in Revelation down into just a few verses. So basically, maybe this will be good, because the general kind of picture that we got in Revelation was this is last day. So this is the beginning. And here's the cross, right? So in this time, this was, we're going to need this too. So 7 times, right? 7 is a number of completion. So all of time is represented in number 7. So this first half is a 3.5. The second half is a 3.5. Okay? So it just Revelation divides all time into basically before Christ, after Christ. So during this time, Satan is around, and he's doing stuff, but he also has access to heaven. So like he's in Job, he goes up to heaven and, challenges God. So he's roaming around, and he's still doing stuff, okay? But then something significant happens here, where, on the cross, defeats Satan, and in the ascension, and in Revelation, this is where we get, Christ ascends, and this is where Satan is cast down. He's cast out of heaven forever because Christ is now there ruling. So now Satan is cast down, and now he's really upset. So now his attacks are even more severe because he knows that he's been defeated, and it's only a matter of time until God pulls the plug. So yeah, it is very much that he was around and it was bad. Now he's beaten and it's even worse. It's kind of like when you dealing with a wounded animal. They're a lot more temperamental. So yeah, that's exactly what this is. So this new king that shows up, he's not like new, like he didn't exist before, but he's describing this. So basically, like 168 BC, all the stuff that was happening with, Antiochus, and then, all the other kings that we were just talking about. That was describing all of, what was going on here. And now the vision is all of this. So we've moved into that. It's going to get fun. All right. Oh, we're doing fine. We'll be great. All right, verses 40 through 45. At the time of the end, okay, so we're at the time of the end. The king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall come with countries, and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, i.e. Jerusalem, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand, Edom and Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver, and all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. Okay. Bear with me here. So these final days are portrayed as a military conflict, a battle. Now, if you go to Revelation, remember there's a lot of battle motif, but we're not talking about literal battles. They're spiritual battles. They're human conflict kind of things. So we're getting into a lot more symbolic stuff here, okay? And we know this is symbolic because it mentions Moab, the Ammonites, and Edom. Specifically Moab. Moab was not in existence anymore. Moab wasn't a thing since 733 BC. So at the time Daniel's writing, Moab has been extinct for 250 years. So the usage of the king of the north, king of the south, Moab, Edom, the Ammonites, Egypt even, these are just stand-ins for the enemies of God. Okay? God is using the enemies that Daniel would know about to symbolize the enemies of the church, essentially. He could have said, and the Russians will be a big thorn in your side. Well, Daniel would be like, who are they? No idea. If God was going to give us a vision, this vision today, he wouldn't use Moab and Cush and all this other stuff. He'd talk about, our enemies. So who are we regard as the great enemies of our time? So, and the kingdoms represented by the kings of the north and kings of the south are gone. By the time after Antiochus, it's all Rome. So this is all very symbolic. Now, unfortunately, with a lot of this stuff, ruler of treasures of gold, news of the east and north shall alarm him. It's like, okay, a lot of this stuff is very confusing, and honestly, nobody really knows exactly what it's talking about specifically, partially because this is stuff that is happening. And it even describes stuff that will happen on into the future. So the fact that we can't really identify exactly what's going on here makes sense because we're in the middle of it. Like, this is referencing stuff, and maybe even, it might even be referring to stuff that's going to happen closer to the end. In which case, well, God, I was going to say God willing, that's far off, but you know what? I'd be okay if we were here. Again, I could be very happy waking up tomorrow and finding out that this is all done with. Before we get further into an election cycle, please bring the end. Come, Lord Jesus, come. I don't think I can handle it. So there are some general concepts of what we got going on. So, there's talk about engaging in a power struggle against a rival power and overcoming him, being on the verge of victory. So, we do see kind of, well, when does Satan seem to overpower his enemy? On the cross, right? I mean, Jesus dies. And it's like, yay! Until it's like, oh, this is not good. And he realizes that, he's on the verge of victory, but something alarms him when he realizes, oh crap, that means I'm done. Okay. The struggle affects God's people, the church, so absolutely. So something alarms him and he'll persecute many. I think probably the cross, but it might be something, don't know. But whatever it is, whatever he thinks he's trying, or what he says, okay, this is what's going to do it, it doesn't help. In the end, there's no one to help him. He comes to his end. So basically, all this says is, and this guy is going to do all sorts of awful stuff until the end, when he is put to an end, and he's no more. Easy. Piece of cake, right?
Who's gonna be in charge of hell?
Satan.
You won't be no more.
Well, I don't.
Go down there. You'll,
See, I don't, the kind of who's in charge, I think that's more of a medieval romantic sort of notion where like Satan is like, overlording, because hell seems to me, especially from scripture, is like everyone's just suffering, Satan included. It's not like and the pictures of Satan that we have like ruling over hell, it's like he likes it, because that's his thing. Like, well, that's not right. It's not like Satan's having a great time. So he's just honestly, on the last day when the resurrection comes, and you've got hell and everybody who occupies that, there's no hierarchy. Nobody's having a good time. And in fact, Satan is, at that point, I would assume, he's just one of many equals in suffering. He doesn't have any special pull, sway, power. It's just
well, he's happy he's got all those other people with him.
well, but I think that's part of like what drives him now is that thought maybe of like, oh yeah, I need to take, because I'm inflicting pain upon God. Meanwhile, God is already. God is outside of all this. He's already I've got a fun thing for Sunday. Ooh boy.
Can't wait.
I've been going to the gym and I hate it, and so I have a lot of time to think now. Too much time, and I've been thinking about a lot of stuff. So yeah, God is beyond all this. So I think part of this is Satan might think that he's like, ooh yeah, I'm scoring points and I'm going to have all these people, but it's like, yeah, and he's going to realize on that last day he's got nothing, and his hell is like everybody's, eternal isolation, absolute absence of God in anything. The one thing that Satan has going for him right now is at least he's still kind of in this realm. Now he might not be in heaven; he's kicked down. But I mean, he's still surrounded by the light, even if he's against it. That's going to be taken away. So sucks to be him. So yeah. All right. Now for some fun stuff. My apologies for this. Oh, we don't get into the numbers yet. Okay. There's numbers. All right. Chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Okay, very quickly. So at that time, whether you're looking at this whole time or this end bit, Michael, the archangel, who has previously been kind of designated as the guardian of the people of God. So God will send his angel to defend the people of God during this time. So even though this gets worse and worse and worse, God will send protection. Is trouble like anything that has come before, which similar to when Jesus describes the destruction of the temple. He says at that time it'll be distress like no one's ever seen before. So the destruction of the temple in 70 AD is a precursor and foreshadowing of that. This is the most clear and overt teaching of the resurrection in the entire Old Testament. Daniel 12 is where we get very clear, this is what happens. On the day of the Lord, some are brought into everlasting righteousness and life, others into everlasting contempt. Easy peasy, right? The only really detail here that might be a little shaky is when it says in verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Like many. Sounds like not everybody. So how is it that we can say that on this day, many of those who are asleep will awake? Some people really try to make a lot about that. It's not necessarily that difficult. There are other places in Scripture where many refers to all. Most pointedly would be Isaiah 53:12. This is talking about Jesus as the suffering servant. He says, therefore, I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sin of many and makes intercession for the transgressors. Jesus bears the sin of all people. When he says many, it just means how many people are all people? Many. So, talking about many who are asleep, all who are asleep. No problem. And then he talks about sealing the book until the time of the end. Basically says, okay, here's the prophecy. We're done. Okay? Don't add anything to this. Don't be tempted to add anything. So you seal up the scroll, you can't add anything else. And basically says, and others will knowledge shall increase. When it is time for this to be understood, it shall be understood. Like now. Because remember, Daniel is back here. And Daniel doesn't get any of this. He's like, I can't believe. You're talking about this stuff? I can't believe that. I have no idea how to wrap my head around this. He does not understand any of this. But he says, it's not for you to understand it right now. Seal it up until the day when people can understand it. And that is in Christ. And we will get that in 1 second. All right, we're almost there, Just bear with me. Give me like 10 minutes, and we're good. Okay, 5 through 7. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, 2 others stood, one on this bank of the stream and one on that bank of the stream. That's kind of how the vision was initially set up. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, Jesus, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, he raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. All right. So Daniel says, or he sees these 2 men again, and one of them, an angel, says, how long will it be? So he's here. How long will it be until this happens? And Jesus says, a time, times, and half a time. 1, 2 plus half. And so we go to Revelation, we get the same thing. This actually was described before in Daniel. So it will be in the fullness of time, in this latter day. Okay? So that's all. Easy. Moving on, verses 8 through 10. Do it quick so you can't ask any questions. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, oh my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Go away, just don't worry about it. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. Okay, This is a great little thing. He says, I don't get any of this. What's the outcome? Because again, he's like, this is blowing his mind. He says, what's the outcome? And the great thing he says, well, first he says, just don't worry about it, Daniel. Go do your thing. This isn't for you anyway. He says, the thing's sealed up. Don't worry. So he basically says, you know what? In this time, guess what? The righteous will be righteous. The righteous will be purified. The righteous will receive and be purified. The wicked, guess what they're going to do during this time?
Keep acting wicked.
Yeah, they're going to be wicked. So, look out in the world today. You see the church. The church should be doing what the church does. Being forgiven, receiving the blessings of God, and sharing the word, loving your neighbor, right? And what is everybody else, what are the wicked doing during this time? They're being wicked. So yeah, he's just like, this is the way it's going to be until... And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise will understand. So even when, it's very easy to look at what's going on in the world, and like, people don't understand what is going on. Why? We look at it and be like, yeah, I know why. We have a really good idea why this is all happening like it is. Satan's doing his thing.
And God is always allowing him to be wicked.
He's allowing it to come to pass, to refine us. The whole, why does God allow bad things to happen? Ultimately, we don't have the answer except that it is base level to draw us closer to Him. And the pushback that I always get from that is, I don't need those bad things to happen. Like, why doesn't God take it easy on me? To which I usually say, I think you're probably more stubborn than you realize. I certainly am. I know, I can look back at all the times where I've hit my various rock bottoms, and then a few years later I find out there's a whole bottom underneath that. And I wonder, like, why did God allow me to, why? It's like, well, because I wasn't exactly doing all the great stuff before that, and I wasn't trusting in Him before, so He allowed, and honestly, even when I was doing my stupid stuff, I wasn't seeking God anyway. So it's like I was basically saying, yeah, that rock bottom, I want that. And God's like, fine. So yeah, why does God allow bad things happen? Because we're stubborn, and sometimes it takes that. I don't know. All right, last bit here. Oh, wait. Yes, last bit. Yeah, we can do this in 5 minutes. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1,335 days. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Okay, so this is all symbolic, okay? If we go back to Revelation, there was a mention of days. I'm running out here. It was 1,260, which equals 42 months. Does anybody remember that from Revelation? I don't know why you would. You're fine. So anyway, back in Revelation, this time of 3.5 was symbolically represented as either 3.5 times or 42 months. 42 months times 30 equals 1,260 days, okay? These are not literal days. So when he talks about numbers here, we're not talking about literal days or years or anything. They're just 1,260 represents a time period. That's all, okay? Now the problem we have here is that it's not 1,260. It's 1,290 and 1,335, which, if you notice, is 30 off, and that's what? And that's what, 45 off from that, right? Yeah, because 1,260 is 90, and then on top of that is, right. So there's a discrepancy here if we want to get to 1,260, right? So 1,290 is 30 more, right? And 1,335 is 75 more. Okay. Now the fun thing comes when you get literalistic interpretations of this, so dispensational things. And this is the stuff that kills me. Because some Christian thought is like, okay, well, this time period is 3.5 years. It has to be years. And 3.5 years is half of the 7-year tribulation. Okay, and because everything's specific and literal. So, okay, so this 3.5 years equals 1,260 days. All right, well, but it's 1,290. So I was like, oh, crap, what do you do with that? So basically what they say is like, well, this represents the final half of the 7 years plus 30 days. So it's the 7-year tribulation ends, and Jesus comes back, and then he has 30 days to clean up stuff. This is nowhere in Scripture. But we have to come up with something for Jesus to do for 30 days. And then 1335 is like, okay, well, that's 45 more days, so that's 75 days. Okay, so after he cleans up everything after his return, he needs an extra 45 days to set things up for his 1,000-year kingdom. Again, nowhere in Scripture. They're just trying to add numbers together and be like, "Ooh," which is always, it makes me laugh just because, like, Jesus needs a month to clean up. Like, really? Sounds like my kids. They need 30 days to do anything.
Are those the same people that believe in the rapture?
Yeah, same thought process. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. So yeah. So this is all symbolic, okay? So basically, here's what you do with this. Okay. So from Jesus on the cross, this time period in Revelation, everywhere else, whatever, even here, is 1,260 days. Okay? So a time period. Meaning that this time period is also referred to as 1,260 days. Okay? Now notice what he says about this. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, 167 BC. This is when Antiochus takes away the burnt offering. Okay? So he's saying from this time till the end is 1290, which actually kind of makes sense because he's saying like, okay, well, there's 1260 represents this whole period of time. So, you know what? A little before that is when this happens. Because again, Daniel has no concept of any of this. He doesn't know when any of this is going to happen. All he knows is in the future. So basically, what he's saying is, okay, when this stuff happens, it'll be just right before this Jesus, which is exactly when it happens. Now, so that's the 1290. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. Go your way till the end. So blessed are you, Daniel, who you're down here. Blessed are you who waits until the end. Well, that's 1335 days. So another extra little chunk of time, more than this. So this represents 30. Well, this represents 75. Which kind of like, okay, so a little bit before Jesus is when this all begins. And Daniel, you're here in 500 some odd BC. So you're a little bit even before that. So, I mean, he's basically saying, look, you're not going to be around when this happens. Don't worry. Be happy. Be very happy you're not going to see this. Be really happy you're not going to be here. But don't worry because you're going to be here. And that's basically all that's saying. That's really all there is to it. Oh, I'm sorry, people online. I forgot to take you off the text. Yeah, I didn't miss anything. So that's all this is saying. You shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days. So Daniel is freaking out because he sees this vision. He's like, oh my gosh, this is insane. I see kingdoms and kings doing awful things. I see the temple being profaned. And think about Daniel. He's living in a time where, and when he's writing this is right at the end. This is when his people have returned to Jerusalem. They're supposed to be rebuilding the temple. They haven't quite gotten around to it. They're doing it. But it's like, wow. After 80 years in exile, Daniel finally has his people back home. They're rebuilding the temple. Worship of Yahweh is going to begin again. And he gets this vision where somebody's sacrificing a pig on the altar of God. Can't even wrap his head around that. Then somebody even worse is going to come and do terrible things. And this whole vision that he's given, it basically says, and now Daniel, seal it up because this isn't for you. Save it for those who will understand it. Well, guess what we get in Revelation? What is one of the first things we see? When John is out there and he sees a scroll with 7 seals that no one can open, right? And he's weeping because no one can open this scroll because he knows that this scroll is the plan of God. Who is the only one found worthy to open the scroll?
Jesus.
Jesus. So even when he tells Daniel, seal it up until the people will understand it. When Jesus opens this up, opens up his gospel, opens up his word, so now all the people who live in this time can persevere because they have this unlocked to them where they understand, oh, I know why this is happening. And he's already been defeated. So I don't have to be afraid of him. I'm just happy that I'm going to be here. And that's all it is.
What about like Moses and Genesis at the very time, they die,
Yep.
they're still gonna come to the end because Daniel was never baptized either.
No, but he was a child of the promise. He believed in the promise of God.
Well,
Just
I
like
think a
Moses,
lot of them
Elijah. Oh yeah, oh totally. There are plenty of Old Testament.
But they're
Plenty of
gonna
people.
have to wait till the very end.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're waiting with everybody who
But then
we've lost.
One time they said that, they said, oh, there's who was it, Moses and,
Elijah.
yeah,
Yeah.
come down from heaven
Yeah.
with Jesus.
Yep.
And so maybe a lot of them are
Yeah.
gonna be up there even.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Are there souls up there now?
Yeah. Yep.
And who collects the ones that go down?
Who collects them?
The
Yeah,
soul
does-
goes
Does
down.
that soul go,
Yeah.
that soul doesn't go to hell? It goes-
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we're good.
Never mind.
So the picture that we get here, so like you die, your body, well, and death is a breaking apart of body and soul. You know, we are fully human as body and soul put together. So death rips it apart. Because death separates what God put together, right? So death separates those two things. So the body lays in the ground, burnt up, whatever. The soul then goes either to hell or to heaven. So basically, you know, we die. So like on this day is the final judgment, right? When everybody stands before God, believers are judged according to their deeds which are covered by the blood of Christ. So they go heaven or new creation. Those who do not believe, their deeds are just judged, and they're sent to eternal condemnation in hell. So if you die here, basically that judgment's already been made. Honestly, the judgment, so like for all of us right here, sitting here, our judgment has already been made on the cross. Christ has forgiven all of your sins. So if we were all, if a big meteor were to crash down upon us right now, you never know. God has a sense of humor about this kind of stuff.
You're in a safe place.
And we're streaming, so that would be one hell of a witness, I tell you what. So we die. Since we are covered by the blood of Christ, our soul then goes to heaven where it waits. And in Revelation, we get the picture of all the saints in heaven, and they're waiting. Meanwhile, those here go down to hell. And we see this when Jesus dies and he descends into hell. That is, he goes down to hell to proclaim his victory. And it says that he actually proclaims to the captives. So to everybody who's down here, all the souls waiting here, he proclaims his victory. And then comes up, spends 40 days and then ascends into heaven. And so that's where, the pre-victory party is all happening. So that's just, so if you happen to die before that, your soul goes there, and then on the last day, you're brought back, and then the final kind of like, okay, now you're done.
So he went down there and said, I told you so,
Yeah.
basically. But all you gotta do is remember John 3:16, right?
Yeah.
That's why. 'Cause
See, this is all clear. This is
you gotta believe,
Yeah.
or you're not gonna have.
crystal clear. All right.
That's
All
good.
right.
Any questions?
Can we keep you another hour?
No.
I was kinda liking it when he was drawing animals up there.
Yeah.
Well, we might get back to that. We'll see. All right. Thank you, everybody online. Thank you for bearing with me tonight. And we'll be back next week.